Welcome to the Growing Tall Poppies podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Nat Green, and I'm so excited to have you join me as we discuss what it means to navigate your way through post-traumatic growth and not just survive, but to thrive after trauma. Through our podcast, we will explore ways for you to create a life filled with greater purpose, self-awareness, and a deep inner peace. Through integrating the many years of knowledge and professional experience, as well as the wisdom of those who have experienced trauma firsthand, we will combine psychology, accelerated approaches, coaching, and personal experience to assist you to learn, to grow, and to thrive. I hope to empower you to create deeper awareness and understanding and stronger connections with yourself and with others, whilst also paving the way for those who have experienced trauma and adversity to reduce their suffering and become the very best versions of themselves in order to thrive. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I'm super excited today to introduce our next guest for Growing Tall Poppies, and it's my absolute pleasure and privilege to welcome my gorgeous and very dear friend, Dr. Hayley D Quinn, to chat with us today. She's very generously offered to share her experiences and her many words of wisdom with us. So let me introduce you to Dr. Hayley Quinn. Dr. Hayley is a clinical psychologist turned anti-burnout business coach, founder of Welcome to Self, and hosts the Welcome to Self with Dr. Hayley D Quinn pod. Hayley works with service-based business owners, transforming their relationship with themselves and their business. Having experienced burnout and chronic illness while studying, working, and solo parenting, Hayley learned to live a fulfilling life without compromising her well-being. She's passionate about helping others to achieve their business goals in a way that prioritizes sustainable practices, self-care, and compassion, so they achieve the outcomes that they want without burning out. She knows that if you thrive, your business can too. So welcome, Hayley. It's so great to have you here.
Hey, Nat, and thanks so much for inviting me on. And first of all, can I say congratulations on starting Growing Tall Poppies? It's no mean feat starting a podcast and stepping out of your comfort zone and learning all the things. So I just really want to say congratulations, because what you're bringing is so valuable. And, you know, podcasts are a really great way of reaching many people. So well done, you.
Thank you. And I'm so excited that you said yes and that you can see the value in the project. And I know that you're going to share so much wisdom, and our listeners are going to be so grateful, because you are the absolute epitome of a tall poppy. You are a tall poppy shining brightly and shining your light in the world. So
Thank you.
one of the things that I also really wanted to share is that you and I have actually only known each other for 18 months, 2 years?
If that even, yeah.
Yeah, not even that. But I know that both of us have shared this, that we developed a really deep connection, and I feel like there's almost a soul connection, and I love that about the relationship that we've got.
Yeah, lovely. And obviously both lovers of purple, although I don't have a lot of purple behind me today, but
but the Hayley I normally see has purple everywhere. So let's start with you giving us a brief introduction on who you are and what you do in the world.
Okay, so like you mentioned before, I'm a clinical psychologist, but mainly now I do anti-burnout business coaching that kind of evolved from working mainly with supervisees. I'd kind of changed from doing a lot of clinical psychology because of some health concerns I'd had, changed how I ran my business so that it worked well for me, was supervising other psychologists and allied health professionals. And they were starting to ask me about, how do I set up a business? How do I do it in a way that's going to be sustainable and works for me? And I just noticed how passionate I was and how excited I got about the work. So I evolved my business some more, and now I focus a lot on the coaching aspect of what I'm doing.
Oh, that's wonderful. And isn't it I see you when you talked about that, you just light up. And it's such a breath of fresh air when you can move out of psychology per se and work into something that can help not only your clients grow, but to help you grow and become more
Yeah,
of what you're looking for.
absolutely. I say to many people, I think when you start the journey of business ownership, it's actually a personal growth journey. You
It
can
certainly
learn
is.
business skills, but you've got to be able to do that kind of inner work. And, that's something I've been doing for a long time now. So I'm always happy to continue growing.
As I have said in one of my initial podcast episodes, one of the things that has always driven me forward is the saying that if you're not green and growing, you're ripe and rotting. So
Yeah.
I love that that's so important to you to continue to grow and strive to be a better version of yourself.
Yeah.
So we know that my guest interviews are around speaking with people who've experienced trauma or adversity and looking at how they've navigated that experience and any lessons or learnings that they've experienced as a result of their trauma and any pearls of wisdom that they'd like to share with us so we can all continue to strive to thrive again. So just wondering if you could share an overview of what's happened for you and what you've been through.
Yeah, I mean, there's been lots of things as I look back over my life that I didn't really see as adversity or trauma at the time. I think, oftentimes we just live our lives thinking whatever we're living is quite normal. And I guess there was a part of me, though, that always knew stuff wasn't right. And I was not a happy person in my younger years. It probably wasn't until I moved over to Australia when I was 25. I kind of had this idea that I was going to completely change what I was doing, go somewhere and try and figure out who I was. Because I was quite lost and disconnected as a young person. And yeah, I had some amazing experiences when I came here, but also was still bouncing around quite a bit and ultimately ended up in a relationship where I was impacted by domestic violence. And I had a small child at the time and made the decision when my son was an infant to remove myself from that relationship. Now, I had had training, maybe 4 years previous to that. I'd done some training with Lifeline. I'd become a Lifeline telephone counsellor and I'd learnt about the cycle of domestic violence and things like that. So I had this knowledge on board, but it still took me a while to recognise that I was caught in that. And then also, we know there's a lot of complexity to that and why people don't just leave. I mean, people say, don't they, why didn't she just leave? It's like, well, because it's more complex than that. So
Yes, definitely.
I feel really fortunate that I had that knowledge on board because I think that led me to being able to leave far quicker than I might have done had I not ever done that training. So I think that for me was quite a pivotal moment in terms of, kind of hitting rock bottom, should we say. That kind of felt like, in my adult life, that was like, okay, my life has to change. I don't want to live like this. I don't want my life to be like this. I certainly didn't want that for my son. So I made the choice to leave that relationship when he was just an infant.
And I can't even begin to imagine the strength that would have taken to, as you said, given the complexities of a domestic violence relationship and the fact that you also had a young child, a little boy that you were caring for and responsible for. So the amount of strength and courage that would have taken you, I'm in awe, Haley.
It's interesting because even as you say that, and I do recognise that, and I think it took a lot of courage to do that, and it did take strength. But I also think about women or people who are still in those relationships and the strength that it takes to be in that kind of a relationship as well. It is such a complex area and not one that we can easily kind of take apart and explore on a podcast. But I think, it's a problem we have certainly here in Australia. It's a problem that needs to be addressed on very many levels.
Definitely.
But yeah, for me, it was, I think, the motivation of I can't have my son living that life. I won't have my son living that life.
Mm.
Rather than I don't want that for me. I don't think I was there because, part of the complexity of that is you get quite worn down and
Mm.
can believe that a lot of things are your fault and that sort of thing. So I think the strength came from my son. And I'd say that's still true today. Like, he motivates me in lots of ways. He's an adult now, but I guess that there's still part of me that wants to model things to him in the way I live my life and live by my values and be compassionate and caring and all those things. And he is a big motivation for me. He inspires me. And yeah,
That's
he's
beautiful.
been
I
my
love that.
greatest gift. I think that's one of the things I always look back and say, well, I wouldn't change my situation. Do I wish I hadn't gone through that? Absolutely. Would I
Mm.
change that? Absolutely not, because I wouldn't have my son, and he is my greatest gift. So
That's beautiful.
yeah, yeah,
So special. And again, I see you light
uh,
up with that.
uh,
And yeah, that's warms my heart.
uh,
Yeah,
uh,
that's absolutely beautiful. So when you look back on that, and I don't want to, make you go back there and make that really uncomfortable. And I know you're certainly not at that place now. I'm so
yeah,
grateful that you feel you could share that.
yeah.
When you look back at that, how did you initially cope once you made that decision?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I don't know if I know the answer. That's. I think
That's okay.
I was in survival mode. Like I say, my son wasn't even 1 year old at that point. I just did the things I needed to do, really. I got on and I don't think I thought about it too much, because if I
Mm,
had, I don't know how well I would have coped. I think one of the things on reflection that would have been helpful for me would have been to reach out for help more.
okay.
I had, throughout my life, found that quite difficult in terms of, you know, reaching out for help. I was quite pseudo independent. I thought I had to do everything myself. I should be able to do everything myself. Um, can't rely on other people to do things. Can't
Mm,
necessarily trust other people to do things. And I think it would have been good to reach out for professional help sooner. Like, I had some really,
okay.
really great friends who helped me. But I think one of the things I did later that might have been helpful to do earlier would have been to actually seek some professional help.
And we don't know what we don't know, do we?
No.
Like you said, you
Yeah.
were so stuck in it that
Yeah.
you couldn't think about it. You just had to do what you needed to do, go through the motions, and you'd
Yeah.
made this huge decision.
Yeah.
And it wasn't for you, it was predominantly for your son.
Yeah.
So he was at the forefront of your mind and you just kept almost on autopilot, just moving through it. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I'd moved out to Australia. I had family overseas, but I was pretty much on my own initially over here. My mum moved out for a little while, but then moved back to the UK a few years later. But I was busy. I actually don't know when I would have fitted time in to go and do therapy at the time.
Mm.
And like I say, there was so much stuff of my own that I was bringing into that, of that I didn't need to do that, or that perhaps I didn't deserve to do that. I was very fortunate that I
Mhm.
had a really, really good GP. She was amazing. So that
That's
was
good.
helpful, and some good solid friendships in there that were helpful as well.
Good. So definitely having, even though you said pseudo independent,
Mm,
and you'd like to think, a strong independent lady doing her best, as a single parent, working, doing everything you were doing, that you still needed that support system. So you had a
yeah,
great GP and that
yeah,
support network of friends
yeah.
are key, aren't they, really, to have a supportive
Absolutely.
community that you can start to build some trust with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And I think, a blend of people who are just in your life that can be supportive, and then professionals who can be in your life that actually
Mhm.
can guide you in a way that they know you need to be guided.
Yes.
You know, like I had to go through a court process and the GP was
Mm.
really helpful in some aspects of that,
Yeah.
that I couldn't have got the type of support I needed from her. I couldn't have just got from like a friend. So I
Mm.
think it thinking about what sort of supports do you need, and we don't know what we don't know. And there's people who specialize in dealing with trauma or dealing with specific things that need to happen. And they do have answers that you don't even know what the question is yet.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. So as far as the person you were back then who was working really hard to just survive and navigate your way through what you'd experienced, how do you think your identity has changed as a result of what's happened to you?
Well, that's a great question. Well, again, that's been a process. I mean, it's been 20 plus years since that happened for me. And through that, I mean, it certainly wasn't a quick kind of change. There's been a lot of traveling the road and learning and growing and having other things happen as well. And then slowly but surely kind of realizing that I needed to, for me anyway, I really needed to change the relationship with myself so that I could start making different decisions and different choices. I had embarked when my son was very little. I embarked on a university journey. I'd dropped out of school earlier in life, so that was a big step for me. I'd always thought of myself as stupid. Ended up with a PhD, so I've kind of had to accept that perhaps I'm not, which is
Nice way
becoming
to
nice.
challenge your thoughts.
It's like, okay, well, I used to call myself a school dropout, but now I don't do that unless it's just part of telling a story.
Mm.
So I'd embarked on a psychology degree. And of course, I learned a lot about human behavior. I learned a lot about myself in that process. It's hard not to, I think. If you do a psychology degree, it is hard not to kind of see yourself in the mirror and start to see who you are and why you do things and recognize your patterns. So that was really, really valuable for me.
Right.
And obviously was kind of quite a long journey of being at university. So lots of learning through that, lots of learning through kind of finding interest through that kind of psychology work that I wanted to go down. And one of the things that I did was some training in a framework called compassion focused therapy. Now, just prior to learning that, actually, I'd come across Christopher Germer's book, The Mindful Path to Self-Compassion, when I was at university. And I read it and there was things in it. I thought, oh, well, this is really good. And then I kind of put the book down. And I was busy, right? I was a single mum. I was sometimes working up to 3 jobs.
Gosh.
So on reflection, it's like, yeah, I read the words in the book, but I didn't read the book.
Yeah, it didn't process it, didn't sink in. You weren't ready to hear it, or you were too busy to
Yeah.
hear it.
So there was little breadcrumbs along the way.
Mm.
And then I had gone to a conference in Sydney, and Professor Paul Gilbert and Dr. Dennis Tersch were doing a presentation on this framework called compassion focused therapy. I've never heard of it. And they were fantastic. I really was engaged by them and I really liked the idea of what they were teaching. So that took me on a journey that I've been on for the past, gosh, I think that was back in 2013, maybe. That took me on a journey of learning all about compassion focused therapy and really embodying that. And the beautiful thing about that framework is, as a practitioner, to be able to use it well with your clients, it's great to really embody it. So for me, I really developed a strong, compassionate self. You know, a part of me that
Right.
is very caring, very nurturing, very understanding, and she's very wise. So I've gone from being somebody who was extremely harsh and self-critical, very self-blaming, very unhappy, and from a young age as well,
Mm-hmm.
and making choices in alignment with that and who I saw myself as, and the consequences that came from that, to somebody now who defaults to a compassionate response. That doesn't mean I don't have a self-critic. It doesn't mean there's not times that I'm self-critical, but But I can honestly say for me now that is, whereas it was just every day, all day when I was younger.
So
And
a
I
huge contrast, really, isn't it? And I think that
absolutely,
the compassionate version of you is who I was really drawn to, because I know personally that I can be, as you said, your own worst critic. And often when things aren't going so well, as you're looking at moving forward through trauma and getting in that path of post-traumatic growth, that critic voice can still be there, nipping away at your heels, can't it? So I love that about
absolutely.
you, that you embody that and just live and breathe compassion. And that
Oh,
was one of the things that really connected me to you. I thought, wow, she is so compassionate. And I love that, because I'd love to be able to be better at that myself. And I'm sure that a lot of our listeners will recognize that that's something that they might struggle with as well. And I'd love you to
yeah.
share a bit more about that, if you don't mind.
Oh, thank you. That's so lovely. That really does warm my heart, that. And I think, many people, and I think many people who are very self-critical and harsh with themselves can be some of the most compassionate people we know. But it's compassion flowing outwards. When we think about compassion, we always need to hold in mind there are 3 flows of compassion. There's compassion from me to you.
Mm-hmm.
There's compassion from others to me, so from you to me.
Yeah.
And then there's compassion for ourselves from ourselves. And often people are very good at being compassionate to other people.
Yes,
And
definitely.
I have found in my professional work and just with talking with people that the 2 people struggle with the most are receiving compassion from other people
Mm-hmm.
or being compassionate to themselves. And
Yes.
people will be different in that. Some people will say self-compassion is the hardest, and other people will say actually receiving compassion is the hardest.
Mm-hmm.
I have an experience. I went to present in New York at a Compassionate Mind retreat. I was going to
Mm-hmm.
be one of the presenters there. Well, I was one of the presenters there. And I got there and we had a speaker's dinner the evening before. And it was at at somebody's house. And I stepped down a step and I misstepped and I
Oh,
twisted my ankle and I ended up on the floor in excruciating pain.
oh,
Days later, swollen ankle and couldn't walk.
oh, ouch.
And everybody rushed over to me. I'm there at a compassion retreat with
Of course they
speakers who are
did.
going to be talking about compassion. So, of course, they all raced over. They saw my suffering. They wanted to alleviate and prevent it. So they rushed over. And I was shocked by my own internal reaction because I won't swear on your podcast.
Oh, you can swear
So
if you need to.
you can
That's
insert
okay.
whatever words you like here. But all these people were coming, "Are you okay?" And I just wanted to tell them to beep off. I had this really aversive, like, I need these people to leave. Why are they all trying to help me?
Mm,
And I had to surrender to it because I couldn't walk. And throughout the retreat, people were going and getting me lunch. They'd got
wow.
crutches for me. They were helping me up the stairs. So I had to surrender to it. But it was really eye-opening for me because I had gone to the retreat thinking, I've developed my compassionate self. I'm all over this compassion thing. I'm like acing it. This is fantastic. And then I realized, wow, okay, my block is receiving compassion from other people. So
Mm,
this part of me that has always found it hard to ask for help, she was still there.
yeah,
She was still quite
definitely.
strong. She's like, I'm fine, even though I wasn't, I couldn't walk.
Mm,
So that was really eye-opening for me. So I think it's important that we understand for ourselves, where do I sit in these flows of compassion? Do I find it easy to
absolutely.
be compassionate to other people? Do I find it easy to welcome in compassion and support from other people? And how do I talk to myself and how do I be with myself? Because it is different for all of us. And all 3 flows are important.
And I would imagine that, given what you've been through, and as you said, you know, one of the pivotal and your rock bottom was as a result of your domestic violence relationship, but you've also given us a bit of guide that there's been some other stuff from your childhood that you'd felt disconnected from self and disconnected from others. So having this and thinking, yes, I'm all over it, really brings home that post-traumatic growth path is not a one and done.
No,
It's a
unfortunately
continual
not.
journey, isn't it? What is that magic pill that we wake up one day and we're all great, we're all better, fixed, all good, ready to go. And I really appreciate you sharing that our listeners are going to be going, oh, wow, compassion, that's really important, that's great. And no doubt move through it and have that similar experience, that there will always be something that we might need to fine tune, that we can continue to learn about and grow on, that continue to build on that post-traumatic growth journey.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned before, like for me, I remember talking to my therapist a long time ago now and saying, you know, I realized the domestic violence relationship wasn't like the trauma. It was the culmination of what we would call big T and little t traumas, you know, throughout my life, childhood, adolescence, early adulthood. That was like the culmination. And I think the post-traumatic growth, when we get to the end of our days, will be the culmination of all the moments of growth, of all the corrective experiences, of all the things we chose and managed to do differently. Because this stuff doesn't just disappear. You know, and I think this is important to talk about, because I think sometimes we talk about healing trauma and that somehow it's just going to disappear and you're never going to be impacted by it. I have not been in that relationship for over 20 years. And there are little things that happen for me sometimes that don't distress me now.
Yeah.
But I notice that I do and then think, oh, why am I doing that? Because if I didn't do that back then, it wasn't safe.
Yeah. So
And
there
then
are
I
still
bring
triggers.
Yeah. And I bring compassion. So it's not that I'm healed emotionally from it.
Yeah.
But it's like anything in your life. It leaves a bit of an imprint. And sometimes something will happen that will remind you of it. And it's not necessarily conscious. And for me, I don't get distressed. I have this compassionate understanding of, well, it makes sense you did that because that's just reminded you of something. And I bring compassion to myself, and then I'll just stop doing that thing and get back to what I was doing.
And that's an absolutely beautiful reframe. I absolutely love that, because, you know, we've talked about breadcrumbs. We've talked about also in some of the other episodes I've done, talking about how our body stores trauma. Our body stores all the experiences at an unconscious level, and, you know, little aches and pains or little things, autoimmune disorders, diseases, chronic illnesses.
Tick.
Yeah, you told me that you've had a chronic illness in your life, as have I, still have. And that's our body's way of letting us know. So if something happens, we still get a little tweak. And yes, exactly, our trauma might have healed and we are in a much better place and we're on that post-traumatic growth path. However, exactly as you said, we can get a little reminder. And I think what a brilliant way for us to work through that is to show us that compassionate side within ourselves, that third component, which is the giving yourself compassion.
Yeah.
I love that, Hayley. That's a great thing. And I think that our listeners will find that most invaluable. And I know that we'll share some links to some, you know, the books and things that you've recommended. We'll also put in the show notes.
Yeah.
So
I think that's where compassion can be really helpful, because I really do think people can get caught up in, well, I shouldn't be feeling like this anymore. That shouldn't impact me anymore. All the shoulds, you know, and we don't need to should all over ourselves. I mean, there's enough of that going on in the world, isn't there? But if we can bring compassion and understanding and this thing of, oh, it's not your fault that you get triggered by things, and how do you want to actually treat yourself when that happens? I know for me that's been, you know, a big game changer.
Oh, definitely. And then, you went on, you did a PhD and you've found your love now, you know, clinical supervision, but now you're working in the anti-burnout coaching area.
Yeah, I
So
love
as
it.
a high achieving health professional, and I hope I can call you that because that's how I see you, definitely a high achiever. What do you feel have been some of your greatest challenges throughout your journey now that you look back?
Okay. First of all, I just want to acknowledge my younger self who dropped out of school. That part of me is like, high achieving health professional, who would have thought?
I love that.
But this is the thing, right? You just don't know what life holds. You don't know what changes can come about. And it can be very different to what you might be experiencing at the time when you feel helpless and hopeless. So that's a big one for me. What would be some of the biggest challenges I faced through that process? I think one of them was my I call it inability or lack of willingness to reach out and really open up to other people and ask for the help I needed. I have been not so much anymore. I've been much, much better. And I say getting, I do still tend to go inward when I'm struggling with things, but I would isolate myself and get a whole lot of shame around I shouldn't need help, which I look back
Okay.
now and think, oh my gosh, I mean, that's just not true. We're human beings. We're
Mm.
interconnected. We need other people. So I think that was probably one of the biggest challenges, was that internal challenge of, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to ask for help. Or some of the other things, I guess, were trying to do that as a busy single mum studying. And for me, it culminated in a significant burnout and chronic health. I remarried a number of years ago now to a very beautiful man.
Good.
And fortunately, when I was at the worst of my health, I was remarried at that time, and he was amazing and extremely supportive, and was probably very pivotal in me starting to practice really allowing myself to be vulnerable and ask for help and that sort of stuff. So that's been really lovely. But yeah, the busyness of trying to do it on my own and manage everything I was trying to manage, which is why it's so important to get the support that you need from other people. Because trying to do that whilst you're recovering from trauma and trying to do it completely on your own without some kind of professional support, because we don't understand, I guess, the mechanisms of what's happening
Yeah.
without making it sound too clinical. But, I think when you can understand and have normalized and validated that what you're experiencing, or if you're having flashbacks or whatever's happening for you in your particular context, is actually normal and expected,
Yes.
then you're not kind of freaking out or thinking you're weird or somehow you're weak because you're not coping, or all that stuff that our tricky mind can say to us. So I think those would have been the not having that willingness to really ask for the help I needed. The context I was in, where I was just really, really busy and trying to survive and take care of my son and earn enough money and all those things.
Yeah, lots of layers of complexity
Yeah.
just to getting through a day and surviving at
Yeah.
that point, no doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned before about your younger self, and that was one of the questions that I thought would be really key to ask you. So, what do you think your younger self would think of everything that you've achieved today?
Oh, she thinks it's fab. She's just like, wow, cool.
So good.
Nice
Yeah.
work, Quinny. Yeah. She's like,
Very proud. I love that, as she should be.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And I'm so grateful to all the younger parts of myself, because every choice I've made, while some of them took me into darker places and some of them, were not the best decisions, they were the best decisions I could make at the time with the skills and knowledge I had under the circumstances I was in. And I'll say to people, and I'll say it for the rest of my life, the thing I love most about choices is you can always make another one. And I
Yeah.
just kept making when I did find myself in places I didn't want to be, I found it in me to make another one. And
To the
it's led
power of
me to,
choice.
it's led me to where I am. Sometimes I think I've, in some periods of my life, I've been a little bit of a slow learner, and that's okay.
And get there in the end, don't we?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm grateful to every version of me that has gone through whatever I've gone through, and the decisions I've made and the choices I've made and the learning that I've embarked on, and the people that now, like your lovely self, the people I've allowed myself to connect with, that I never used to let myself do that. It didn't feel right for me. It didn't, again, based on my own history. I think if we ask ourselves, what is it about your own history that helps you make sense of why you're choosing what you're choosing, or why you're struggling what you're struggling, or why you're feeling what you're feeling, can be really helpful. And I stayed away,
Great question.
particularly from groups of women as well,
Mm-hmm.
based on my own history. And now I embrace it, and I'm in numerous different groups of women, and it's one of the most beautiful and nourishing aspects of my life now.
Oh, that's fabulous. So much growth as a result of what you've been through, that had you not been through it, as horrible as it was, as you said, you wouldn't be where you are today.
Yeah. I mean, who knows what my life would have looked like? I think sometimes, like I say, would I prefer to have had everything I needed as a child, everything I needed as an adolescent, made really great choices, not gone through all these things? Of course I would. As long as I could have my son at the end of it.
Exactly.
But, we are the result of all the things, including genetics.
Yeah.
And, experiences we've been through, good, bad, and indifferent, the social conditioning we've had, the family conditioning. We are a result of all those things. And I think if we can come to terms with that and accept that, and accept all parts of ourselves, we all have shadow sides. We all have
definitely
parts of ourselves we don't like, or have behaved in ways that perhaps we're not proud of. I know I can look back now. There's things in my earlier life where I don't think people would have looked at me and said, "Oh, she oozes compassion. She's such a lovely woman." I was probably snarly and a bit bitchy and, hostile, because I was in my threat system all the time.
Absolutely.
I can look back at that now and again say, do you know what? I was doing the best I could.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that that's really important, that we reflect on that we all do the best we can.
Yeah.
But we also are influenced by our experiences and what we bring to the table. So what I love most about the work that you do and the compassion that you've embraced is that by allowing us to channel those three ways of managing the compassion threads, that we can really embrace that. And as you said, choose to have a different outcome.
Yeah.
I love it. So thank you for sharing that. So do you think, Hayley, that there's, as I say in a lot of my podcasts, I talk about there being breadcrumbs. And one of the things that as we navigate and we meet a number of guests that I'm looking at is, do you think there's any specific qualities, internal or personality traits or personal attributes, that you see as key for moving through trauma and into post-traumatic growth from your experience?
Wow.
Or even what you've seen with clients?
That is a great question. When I think about myself and I think about some of the clients that I've worked with in the past, or currently sort of longer term clients, there is a sense of really wanting things to be different.
Okay.
There is a determination, like this determination. And I also want to say, and a bit of a stubbornness.
Write that down. I love that. Determination
And I mean that,
stubbornness.
and I mean that in a really loving way, but there is this like this stubbornness. No, I'm doing it. I'm going to this kind of determination, stubbornness. I think Gosh, it's hard to sort of sum it up in what would be those kind of traits that people have. I think curiosity comes into it. What was it that happened? And it's almost this shift from, okay, so why did that happen? But then how can it be different? How can we look at how it can be different? So yeah, I think this kind of curiosity, perhaps open-mindedness to that. I mean, courage. I think and I think about, and I can say that about myself as well, but I think about some of the clients that I work or have worked with, and the courage and the heart, really kind of wholehearted people. Comes
So
to
many,
mind
really
when
a lot of qualities there.
Yeah,
Determination, stubbornness,
yeah,
curiosity, and heart.
courage. There's this willingness. I think there has to be a willingness to do it differently. And I think there'd be things that would be different for different people in that as well. But they're the ones that come to mind. It's one of those questions where I always think, do you know what? As soon as we stop recording this podcast and I sit down and have a cup of tea, I'm going to come up with some brilliant responses to that.
Oh, that's wonderful. So, as we move to wrapping up the conversation, I just wanted to say a massive thank you. And I just wanted to ask you, where can our listeners find you, find out more about you, and find you online?
Okay. And I will answer that in a minute. But I just wanted to share something that is a quote that I was thinking about the other day when I knew I was coming on here, and you'd given me a little bit of an idea of what some of the questions might be. I can't remember what the question was, but I remember thinking, oh my gosh, Winnie the Pooh was so right. You're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. And I really want people to hear that, because I think when we have been knocked down in whatever form the trauma or adversity has taken, it can really leave us feeling like we're not enough, we're not capable, we're defective, we're broken, all those things. And that's not true. So Winnie the Pooh was spot on. Thank you, A.A. Milne. Hey?
I love it. Just say that again one more time so that everyone really takes that in for us, Hayley.
You're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
Who would have thought we'd learn so much from Winnie the Pooh, hey?
And I've still got my old Winnie the Pooh. I've got 2 kind of compendiums, I think we called them back then, of Winnie the Pooh stories. And I never knew back then, when I was reading those stories, that I would reflect back on a podcast with the wonderful Dr. Nat Green talking about growing tall poppies and quoting Winnie the Pooh.
I love it.
So again, you just don't know where life is going to take you and where you're going to end up.
And those little breadcrumbs that we pick up along the way, that we store somewhere.
Yeah.
And we never really know how they will shape our future.
Absolutely.
And when we might need to draw on them. So I think, that's note to everyone, note to self, note to everyone, that we pick up things along the way and we never quite know how they'll shape things in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. So now back to your question. Where can people find me?
Yeah, where will we find you? And tell us a bit about what you're doing now, because I know you're getting ready to launch your new program and I'm really excited. Feel free to share that with us.
Oh, thank you so much. So yes, I work mainly with service-based business owners, and I'm about to launch my Welcome to Self Time to Thrive group coaching program, which is a 13-week live program for business owners. And it really is about growing a thriving and successful business, but holding at the core your own well-being. That, for me, having been through everything I've been through, I know in my heart of hearts that if we do not take care of ourselves, then it's really hard to take care of anything else. So, if we are taking care of ourselves and thriving, then the rest of the things in our life can thrive. So I'll be launching that next month. So I'm very excited about that. I'm mainly hanging out on Instagram under Dr. Hayley D Quinn. I pretty much share the content to Facebook. So you can find me on Facebook, but it's not very pretty much the same kind of content. And my website is www.Dr Hayley Hayley D Quinn QUINN.com. And I'm always happy for people to DM me or flick me an email. And yeah, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you. It's really, really lovely.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and such a breadth and depth of knowledge that I've just found so valuable. And I know that our listeners will love it and really embrace, especially the compassion and the self-compassion work that you've shared with us today. But also you've shown us what is possible and the courage, the determination that you've demonstrated as you've moved through your life and what you've achieved are amazing. And you definitely inspire me, and you are shining so brightly like the biggest tall poppy I know. So thank you so much, Hayley.
Thank you. That's really lovely. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye for now.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining me in this episode of Growing Tall Poppies. It is my deepest hope that today's episode may have inspired and empowered you to step fully into your post-traumatic growth so that you can have absolute clarity around who you are, what matters the most to you, and to assist you to release your negative emotions and regulate your nervous system so you can fully thrive. New episodes are published every Tuesday, and I hope you'll continue to join us as we explore both the strategies and the personal qualities required to fully live a life of post-traumatic growth and to thrive. So if it feels aligned to you and really resonates, then I invite you to hit subscribe, and it would mean the world to us if you could share this episode with others who you feel may benefit too. You may also find me on Instagram at Growing Tall Poppies and Facebook, Dr. Natalie Green. Remember, every moment is an opportunity to look for the lessons and to learn and increase your ability to live the life you desire and deserve. So for now, stay connected, stay inspired, stand tall like the tall poppy you are, and keep shining your light brightly in the world. Bye for now.